RE-Power the Peninsula, our series about HEA's renewable goal and how you can help reach it. And today we're really concentrating on the second half of that mission, how you can help reach the HEA renewable goal. We're going to be talking about the HEA board and this spring's election, which as you may know, there are 9 members on the HEA board. They're elected member owners who make the co-op's decisions, and there are 3 of them from each of 3 districts that you can see on the map there. And in each of those districts, one of those 3 seats is up for election every year. So directors serve 3-year terms. There's a 3-term limit, so directors can be on the board a total of 9 consecutive years. One thing for the renewable goal that's important is that with 3 directors, 3 of 9 up for election each year, there's a possibility of a third of the board turning over every year, which has happened in the recent past. HEA created its renewable goal in January 2021. And since then, 3 seats have changed hands, a third of the board. So as you can imagine, this creates the potential for the board to change pretty dramatically in a very short period of time, policy-wise. So this year, there are 3 more seats up for election, and for the renewable goal to survive, we need pro-renewable candidates in those seats. So the election is going on right now. Ballots were mailed April 4th. If you've lost yours or haven't got it yet, you can contact HEA Member Services at 800-478-8551. If you have your ballot, you'll want to mail it back by May 3rd at 5 p.m. And the results are being announced May 4th at the HEA annual meeting in Kenai. So this is an important election. As I've stated, the board needs to keep a pro-renewable majority in order for the renewable goal to continue moving forward. And we have 2 pro-renewable candidates running this year that Inlet Keeper has endorsed. In District 3, Erin McKittrick is finishing her first term on the board and is running for re-election. We're supporting her. And in District 1, the Northern District, covering Kenai and Nikiski, Summer Lazenby is running for her first time around the board. In District 2, covering Sterling and Soldotna, there's 1 candidate running unopposed, whom we haven't endorsed. But the two pro-renewable candidates that we're supporting are here with us today. And I'll stop the screen share and we can say hello and start the conversation. Thank you both for coming, Summer and Erin.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Great. Thank you for coming. So, all right, I think I have you both pinned on the screen. You should be appearing side by side, I think. Is that what the people on the Zoom are seeing?
No.
Okay.
But it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's a small group setting tonight, so
Okay,
I think it's fine. We can see both of you well.
We'll pop up when we talk.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, so again, thank you both for coming. And before I start firing questions at you, I'll let you both introduce yourselves, your history with the community, and why you're running for the HEA board. So, Erin, I'll let you kick off.
Sure. So I live in Soldovia, which is not connected to the highway system, but is connected to the same electric grid. So the very, very southern end of HEA. Lived here for about 14 years. My husband's family is from here. I have a couple kids, work at home, live on the side of a mountain. And like Ben said earlier, I'm running for my second term at HEA. I first got on the board 3 years ago, and basically what I did it then and kind of now is I think that, wow, this is actually a really more powerful and important position than a lot of us think about, because usually you think a utility is just, some company that's just out there doing what it does and trying to get money, but our utility is a cooperative. So we actually have control over it. We have responsibility for it. And I think that that's really an important lever to make things better for our community. And then more specifically, how could you make things better? Well, our electricity is expensive and nobody likes that. And, we can't immediately fix it. But one of the most expensive things in that expensive electricity is the cost of fuel. It's the cost of the natural gas that goes in our power plants. And there's pretty much only one company that supplies it. And if we can get more renewable sources of power to kind of diversify what we can get power from, we could potentially make it cheaper and we can become more resilient. And so that's a lot of it. And then the other thing is that likewise, with people not even understanding that their utility is a co-op and something you can vote for, people just don't have a lot of understanding of how the grid works or what's going on. And I think they should know. So I make it a priority to try to communicate with members and let everybody know about what's happening on a grid-wide scale and programs that we have for individuals and updates from all the meetings. So that's it.
All right, thank you, Erin. So I'll pin Summer's video, and Summer, if you would introduce yourself, who you are, and why you want to be on the HEA board.
Hi, I'm Summer Lazenby, and I have been a 24-year resident of the Kenai Peninsula. I understand how vital it is to have affordable, reliable, and efficient energy. This is the state of Alaska. That's definitely something that's a necessary part of life anywhere, but certainly when you have snow on the ground 9 months out of the year almost. I'm running, because I have a large background in working with diverse groups. I've worked on the Food Bank Board and the Kenai Community Fund, the Lee Shore Center. I've taught space science. I've got experience running a seafood plant, and I bring all of that diversity to everything I approach. And like Erin said, we're a member-owned cooperative, and part of being one of those members is wanting to have a voice. And I fully support and want to parrot a lot of what Erin said about the need for renewables and reducing our costs. And the way to do that is shifting from an oil-based background to one of renewables. It doesn't mean getting rid of oil-based energy generation 100%, but moving in that direction and setting HEA up for the best possible position in the future.
All right, thank you, Summer. So the first question, we'll pitch it to Summer first. Are there any particular projects or ideas you would champion as an HEA board member? And then the flip side of that, are there any particular projects or ideas you would oppose?
Certainly, I support the 50% renewable by 2025. I think it's doable. We're at 14% now. That's something that I would champion, with the caveat that projects or certain, different avenues don't make sense for the cooperative, then that's not something that I would support. As we move forward and there's a lot of different options on the table, I think we can definitely get to that 50% renewable. That's something that I very much support. What I don't support is immediately moving away from, the oil-based power generation. It's a necessary component. And I think what we need to focus on is the whole picture. Sometimes when people hear renewables, they immediately focus on, oh, well, we're getting rid of what has worked for 100 years. That's not at all what I support. What I support is proactive thinking, putting plans in place that set the cooperative up for an efficient energy future.
Thank you. And the same question to Erin. Particular projects or ideas you would champion, and any you would oppose.
Sure. And I want to kind of to follow along on what Summer said there. You definitely need to look at the specifics, right? And that's actually being proactive is really the main point, because kind of like Summer touched on, we want renewable energy, but we want this to increase our reliability. We want this to lower our costs, and nobody is actually capable, without knowing all the details, of knowing just which renewable projects are going to pan out to be the most productive. And so I think that's why the thing I support most is the proactive search for those options. We're a remote little corner of Alaska. There aren't big companies coming to solve our energy problems for us. We need to solve them. So one thing that I really support is that we just have 4 grant proposals recommended for funding from the Alaska Energy Authority to do wind monitoring at 4 potential wind project sites on the Kenai Peninsula. And I very much support that. And I will hopefully support there being an actual wind project in one of those spots, but I don't know that yet, because that's where we need the data. That's where we need to see if it makes sense, but we won't know if we don't look. Similarly, the Alaska Energy Authority is taking the lead on looking into whether it makes sense to divert even more water into the Bradley Dam, which is potentially a whole lot more renewable energy with the stable profile of hydro. That's potentially a really good idea. Also needs data to support it. So I guess that's kind of my main answer on that front. I think as far as opposing, I haven't seen anything come up lately that I would particularly oppose. I think that most of the things that are, going on right now is like, other than these sort of new exciting things I'm talking about, a lot of what HEA does, it needs to continue doing, maintaining existing power plants, maintaining our existing infrastructure.
Thank you. Well, for the next question, I'm going to preface it with a bit of
And
context.
the sound's not coming through.
Hello?
Apologies, that was my fault.
Hello?
I can hear you, Ben. Yes, you're all good.
All right. So for the next question, I'm going to go back to the slides for a bit of context. So this graphic is from HEA's 2020 annual report, and it represents a pretty typical breakdown of their costs. Usually fuel and purchase power, that's predominantly natural gas fuel, makes up about a third of the bill, and production and transmission, that's maintaining the actual generators and the large transmission lines that carry the power from the generators into neighborhoods, is a little less than a third. And then likewise, distribution, which are the lines within neighborhoods that carry the power from substations into homes. And then accounts and administration are around 4 and 10% roughly. So this is to preface the question of these costs that drive HEA's rates. Which can the board control, and what are your plans for managing them? And we'll pitch it first this time to Summer.
Is it possible to put that slide back up?
Yeah, certainly. All right.
Okay. Well, let me move my thing so I can see it completely. I think there's room probably in everything to find ways to save money. Certainly one of the biggest expenses that we have very, very limited control over is the cost of fuel. We have one fuel vendor, and when you have a monopoly, you can basically set the rate, and we don't have the option to access those fuel, put out a bid to where we can have some competition. So the fuel costs are the fuel costs. Production and transmission, well, we've got some control where if we're not buying fuel, we can reduce the fuel costs. And then that, solar is free, hydro is free, wind is free once you have the infrastructure in place. You don't have to pay to access those resources. Yes, there's always going to be costs associated with maintaining the infrastructure or installing the infrastructure. But once those are in play, then you've reduced those costs immediately. So that's where I think the board will have the biggest impact as far as making choices that are wise and looking ahead. A lot of times I think people get caught up in what does it cost today without recognizing what it will cost in 5 years or what it will cost in 10 years. When I graduated high school, where I lived, I think I was paying like $1.50 in fuel. Now, mind you, that when I wanted to fill up my car, mind you, that was 25 years ago. But fuel is not getting cheaper. And hydro and solar and wind cost exactly what they did then that they cost today. Those three components don't have any cost once you get past the infrastructure and maintenance. So that's where I think the board has the biggest opportunity to reduce costs moving forward.
All right, thank you, Summer. And Erin, same question.
Sure. So like Summer said, that fuel, that's the biggest piece. And you definitely have the most potential over the long term to reduce the cost by reducing the amount you need to pay for fuel. And to follow on to Summer's point about once you have the infrastructure, the Bradley Lake Hydro Project is a perfect example of this, because in 1991, when Bradley was built, its cost was higher than the cost of fossil fuel power at the time. But Bradley it just had pretty much fixed costs from 1991 all the way till last summer when the bonds were finally paid off. And over that time, it started out as the more expensive power on the rail belt. And now it's the cheapest by a long shot. And it's still there. It still works fine. It can keep going at a pretty low annual maintenance cost, for decades more. I would like to speak to a few of the other things too, because although the fuel and purchase power is the biggest, there is some real potential to maybe take bites out of those other pieces through, again, investing in things that are going to be good for the long term. So on the production and transmission end, that includes things like maintaining power plants. So HEA has one old, very inefficient natural gas power plant that we very rarely use, but we need it as a backup. Now, if the rail belt utilities are talking about improving transmission across the grid between the different utilities, we also now have a battery that can provide some of that instantaneous backup. So you get some of those things going. Can we just shut down the oldest, least efficient power plant entirely and save that $1 million a year? That would be nice. Additionally, some of those distribution costs are all the helicopters flying across Catchmack Bay over to my neck of the woods to fix things when the power goes out, run our backup generator. HEA is looking into whether they can get federal infrastructure money to make the line across Catchmack Bay a double loop. And if you did that, it'd be much more reliable and you would reduce those costs. So there are actually specific things that the board can work towards that can hit most or all of those pieces. Things like consumer accounts is mostly things like credit card fees. We can't actually do much with that. And there's small efficiencies that can be found anywhere. Now, on the other hand, one thing you can't see, I think it's probably might be hidden in administrative in general, or maybe is that there's the cybersecurity costs are going up and up every year, which is a problem for utilities all around the world that I'm not sure the best fix for that.
All right. Thank you. So as we said earlier, the terms are 3 years. There's a possibility of serving 3 consecutive terms. So that's a total of 9 possible years on the board for Summer, or 6 more years for Erin. And we'll go to Erin first. Within this possible range of time on the board, what challenges do you see approaching for HEA, and what are some opportunities that we should be trying to take advantage of within that time period?
I mean, kind of sound like a broken record here, but the price of natural gas probably is the single biggest challenge. We actually have our gas contract runs out in spring of 2024, which is not that long from now. And last time we put that contract out for bid, Hillcorp was the only company that bid. And so that's what we got. And so what happens in 2024? I don't think anybody really knows. And so that's a big challenge. And the opportunities, I think it's an exciting time. I think the costs of renewable technologies have decreased enough to make them competitive with natural gas here. And so we'll have probably decisions to make on all kinds of potential projects. And we'll need to decide whether we're going to put the effort in to look for opportunities. And then we'll need to decide whether those opportunities are good for HEA members or not. And so I suspect there'll be a lot of important decisions there. We'll also need to make decisions working with the other rail belt utilities, either in the new ERO rail belt organization or outside it, and can potentially take advantage of coordination and/or federal infrastructure money to improve the transmission system and the whole grid. And that could enable both bigger renewable projects and potential reliability and cost improvements in general.
All right, and Summer, within your 3-year term that you're seeking now, and within the 9 possible years that you could serve on the board, what are the challenges and opportunities that you see?
Again, to parrot what Erin said, the fuel costs are a big one. That's going to be something that doesn't go away while we still primarily rely on that. a war broke out 5,000 miles away and suddenly, gas shot up dollars per gallon. I think stuff like that is always, until we shift away from that, we're always going to face those challenges. If a pipeline gets shut down, if this president or that president wins the presidency, those are going to remain challenges in that regard. I think climate change is going to be an issue. I think the spruce bark beetle issue is going to be something that we're going to need to contend with. As case in point, the fire that was in 2019 was a significant challenge for HEA and the community as a whole. And I think that until there's something in place with all of the dead, dead trees, that we're going to continue to have to face some of those issues. And then finally, I think the growth of our community. Anecdotally, I've heard there's been, a significant increase in house sales. There's not as many house available because they get swiped up as soon as they get put on the market. With with COVID, I know many folks have traveled to Alaska because you can't travel internationally, and they've come here, and it's like, hey, let's move here. And they are looking at summer homes, and I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see an uptick in our population. And with that, growth is something that's going to have to be managed as more and more people come onto the electrical grid, whether they come on just in the standard format or if they come on with their own renewable system in their home or business.
All right, thank you. And we're going to go back to the slides again to give some context to this next question as well. So those of you who were at our last RE-Power session, this will look familiar. We talked about the renewable portfolio standards bills that are in the legislature right now. That's House Bill 301 and Senate Bill 179. That would set a series of renewable goals for the entire rail belt. So the ultimate one you'll see there is 80% by 2040. And there's a series of intermediate goals. You'll notice HEA's 50% by 2025 is well in advance of most of the intermediate goals. But there's that ultimate goal of 80% by 2040. So if there is a renewable portfolio standard in place within your term, what would you do to help HEA meet it? And we'll go to Summer first. You're muted, Summer.
Sorry, some time to update thing popped up and you guys went away for a minute. I think the biggest thing would be looking at ways that to work with all of the other electricity companies throughout the state of Alaska. I think working together, it would make it easier to get to those thresholds. Like you stated, HEA is currently taking a much more aggressive push to get to 50% in the next 3 years, whereas I don't see the slide anymore. I believe it was 2035 to get to 55%. But I think, there's efficiency in numbers. And so if you've got 7 entities working together, as opposed to just each of us individually trying to set these various thresholds, that would be where I would see the easiest way to meet some of those standards that those bills have built in. Were they to become law, that would be the approach that I would take.
And Erin, same question.
Yeah, I think that, as Summer pointed out, in the short term, HEA's goals are more ambitious. And so mostly what we need to do in the short term is what we've been doing. Now, Summer's right that, with more utilities working together, that makes it easier. I think we can meet our own goals on our own, but it's great not to have to. Sometimes it can be advantageous to, build one bigger project rather than, multiple smaller projects and share the resulting energy. This isn't always true because you also have to deal with transmission. I do think that one thing a statewide standard would help with is it would provide a consistency of direction both at HEA and across the state. Because as Ben mentioned earlier, utility boards, it's awesome that we have community control and we elect people, but it's also true that to actually develop projects, infrastructure projects, they take time to do. So if the motivation to build something is likely to change every year, nothing will get built because it simply just takes longer to actually bring a project all the way to fruition. So some kind of direction that's going to persist through elections will allow boards to still make the important decisions about what is good for their utilities, but will kind of keep everybody moving as a team. And I think especially for those larger goals, things like the 80% goal, you actually really need that coordination because you both need more robust transmission between the utilities and also probably some larger projects, because it would be pretty hard for a small utility like HEA probably to get all the way to 80% on its own on the Kenai Peninsula.
All right. Well, we're about to open it up to audience questions, but before we do, I'm going to go back to the slides one last time to talk about some opportunities for action. And the obvious one, of course, is vote in the HEA election. You likely have your ballot if you're an HEA member, and you'll be getting it soon. Remember to send it back by May 4th. And another important thing, tell all your friends, text them, call them, speak to them. This is an important election and it flies under a lot of people's radars. So shout it from the rooftops. And also, tomorrow night, same time, 5:30 to 6:30 p.m., the Alaska Public Interest Research Group is going to be talking about the Rail Belt Reliability Council. And Satchel, if you could put a link to that Zoom registration in the chat, this is an opportunity to learn about some of the things we were just talking about, how the utilities are starting to cooperate and work together. That's an important group and for all of our energy future. So there's a good chance to learn about that. There's also coming up, for those of you who were at some of our previous RE-Power events, you might remember hearing from Jen Miller of Renewable Independent Power Producer, the group that's building a solar farm. That group is hoping to work with the borough for a tax exemption that will make their project much more likely to happen. So that's something you can talk to your borough assembly member about. Let them know that you support the solar farm. And lastly, on Earth Day, April 22nd, Cook and the Keepers holding an art opening at our studio in Soldotna from 4 to 7 p.m. And we're going to have some poetry, some music, and some paintings by Steve Schoonemaker, which you can see behind me on the wall here. So there's a little preview of the Earth Day art exhibit. So with that, we're going to be opening it up to questions from the audience. And Tim, I see you just went off mute. Do you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say thank you to all. It was very, very informative. Thank you.
All right, Hig.
Summer, I was just curious, like what you're hearing kind of from your constituency up there as far as, everyone, of course, you want to have cheap electricity, but I'm curious what kind of in more detail, what sort of interests or engagement people have with HEA? Like, what is it when you talk to people that they want to talk about?
They want to talk about the cost of their bill. Like 100% of the people who I've discussed, that I'm running for HEA, literally the very first thing out of their mouth is, are you going to make my bill cheaper? So that would be the primary focus, I think, on almost everyone that I've talked to. I think in several people that I've talked to, there is not a lot of understanding about renewables. Excuse me. And there's been an opportunity when I have said, a lot of times when people hear the word renewable, they immediately remove all thoughts of, it's a thought of like, we are immediately abandoning oil-based options. And I take the opportunity to say, no, that's not at all what the goal is. So that has been, when I've had the opportunity to talk to people, that's been generally the course of the conversation.
Do people make the connection, like I've always been intrigued by like the difference in the way people talk about HEA versus NSTAR. HEA being an organization they have a lot of control over, and NSTAR not so much, but I hear a lot more complaining about HEA, and I don't know, I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that.
No, it's a great question, because I don't think people really understand what a cooperative means. A lot of the population hasn't been a cooperative member where they're getting the credits back from, X number of years ago. So I think that's there's an opportunity for education that, we all own this entity as a group, as opposed to, because it does feel like this is your bill, pay it or you will turn off your electricity. I get that. I absolutely get that. But I just don't think people have whether they, it's just they haven't taken the time to really find out what a cooperative is, or HEA hasn't done well at educating people. But that is one of the things where I think there's just room for, there's opportunity to further educate all of the cooperative members what that means.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting.
I'd like to follow up with a question kind of related to that. One of the things, besides the cost of my bill, the thing that grinds my gears most about HEA is that they're not very communicative from an organizational standpoint to their members about upcoming meetings, getting agendas out at a reasonable time for people to plan, and just generally I don't see a lot of action to make board meetings more appealing or accessible to members. And so I'm curious if either of you would be willing to champion some board, maybe bylaw changes, or I'm not exactly sure what would need to happen, but some real action from HEA to see board meetings get posted on social media a week ahead of time or 2 weeks ahead of time, things like that. How would you make HEA more accessible to its members?
Sure, I can maybe take that first because I'm actually there. I would say that, yes, I think that is an issue. And, one of the ways I've been kind of pushing back on that is just doing a lot of communication myself as a board member, trying to get things out there on social media and keep people up to speed. That isn't the same. I understand. I think that as the board meetings, it's interesting to, it's hard to know sometimes what people want. One clear issue that I think we've mostly resolved now is the fact that the closed secret executive sessions, we've been trying to put them at the end of meetings instead of having them just interrupting the middle of the meeting, so people have to sign out and call back in. I think that very few board members have expressed interest in coming to the meetings, and I would really like to know from the membership, and I haven't really been successful to find out what they want, like what they want from HEA, what would help. It's hard to be improving a relationship without knowing what people want out of it.
Yeah, Ben, this is Gary. I have a question that actually it's not a question so much as a comment, Erin and Heather. What I'm hearing is not an uncommon plea from you being on the board and whatever, and that is that people are ignorant or somewhat ignorant of exactly what our board is, not the board, what HEA is and what it does for us and how much that 38% is difficult to whittle away and whatever. But I'm just wondering if there was something we as a public part of the cooperative, not being on the board, can do in an educational context. How can we educate people who are HEA members better to let them know what they're up against, to let them know what it's going to take to make the changes that we all want to see made, and so those costs come down?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. We'll let Summer tackle the transparency question as well, and also Summer, if you want to weigh in on how to help educate the members, you can take a shot at that too.
I'm a strong advocate for transparent everything as much as possible. I know that isn't always feasible with various issues, but I think being as transparent as possible, lay your cards on the table, just, explain it out as best one can. I do understand that sometimes these are some higher level issues, and bringing them down to everyday terminology isn't always the easiest to do. But I think, making things as accessible as possible. If it is possible to get various agendas out ahead of time, set a hard and fast deadline, an agenda has to be issued 2 weeks in advance. I'm totally okay with that, with the stipulation that sometimes things come up within those 2 weeks that have to get added to agendas. That's how boards sometimes work. You can't just push it off for 6 weeks because it missed the agenda deadline that's been, arbitrarily set. So yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to looking at ways to be transparent. I know Erin has really made an effort to share information and say what's going on, and I think that's great. I think that would be something that I will aim to do, maybe not as eloquently as Erin is capable of doing, but I absolutely would have conversations and share information as able. And then as far as understanding, general population understanding what a cooperative is, I do think sometimes there's a level of personal responsibility that folks need to exercise on their own to understand things. You can put out as much information as you possibly can, but if folks don't take the time to look at it and try to research it and try to understand it, you can only throw so much information at folks and then expect them to, they're going to do with it what they're going to do with it. But I would think, maybe at the annual meeting in the future, there could be like, an educational opportunity to really educate folks. I would be curious to see how many people come to the annual meeting. That tells me, if it's what that percentage of membership is, gives you a clue on how many people are engaged in the cooperative from an interest level, as opposed to just they're writing their HEA, check each month.
All right. Erin, do you have any thoughts on member education? And after that, I saw Tim had his hand up, so we'll go to him next.
I also will note, I'm going to answer this, but that Kat has been putting some questions in the chat that we should take as well.
Okay.
So let's not
Kat,
forget those.
I've been missing those.
So as far as one thing that, anybody can do is just sort of, in the course of the conversations you have in life with the people try to raise people's awareness, even if not necessarily the details of everything that's going on in the power grid, but just people should know that HEA is, an organization that in a way acts kind of like a local government. You vote for the people who run it, and because a power bill is pretty important in most people's daily lives, HEA's impact on your life is probably similar to the impact of your local city and borough governments in a lot of cases, and people should think of it that way as something that ought to be responsive to them. Because I think if even just that message gets out that, hey, this is my utility and it ought to be responsive to me, then maybe people will start, asking the board questions. Sometimes people do email us or showing up to meetings, calling in. I think that the members, kind of like Summer said, the members need to take that on too, to think, hey, this is our utility. What's it doing for us? I want to know something.
All right. We'll put Kat's question next that she asked a while ago in the chat about what do each of you advocate regarding storage? And Erin, I'll let you take the first whack at that.
Well, the simple answer is that one thing that I did advocate for and is actually currently operating is the Tesla battery pack that we now have in Soldotna that has 93 megawatt hours of storage. Storage is kind of grid scale storage is actually a pretty, rapidly increasing thing, partly because batteries like that have become cheaper. And one thing that kind of storage does for you is it allows you to save a lot of fuel, as well as allowing the integration of renewables. So I think that is, expected to save us maybe 11% of fuel in running more efficiently, especially when the line to Anchorage is down. And that becomes even more true if you use it to balance the ups and downs of solar and wind power. But that's true even without it. Now, that kind of storage that we have in that battery, it seems like, wow, this is really big, but it's not even big enough to say, have sun all day and then run off the battery all night. So if you really, in the, 50% renewable goal next, few years time frame, that's okay. We can actually, with our existing fossil fuel plants and the battery and smart running of different resources, we can do a lot with the storage we have. If you're going to start getting closer beyond 50%, start getting up to 80, like in the RPS, or 100, you definitely need to get a little bit more creative and with potentially resources that are either more consistent or more storage that would last for longer. And one of the ways that hydro is one of the best ways to do that, either if you have existing hydro projects that store energy in their reservoirs, or if you have some kind of pumped hydro system where you basically make a hydro plant on top of a mountain where there wasn't one before. So I think that that's, you know, that's potentially in the future. It's not something we need right now.
I would simply say I concur with everything Erin said. I think there's storage has an opportunity for growth. It's something that as time goes on, you know, it's improved from where it was 20 years ago, and as time moves forward 20 years from now, it will be better. But that's, you know, if we can find a way to efficiently store renewable power generation in an efficient and affordable way, I absolutely advocate for that.
All right, and Tim, I saw you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, thank you. I really learned about the co-op in 2019, late 2019, I think it was, or 20. You had a series of, you had something at the Kenai Peninsula College that was a series of seminars that ran. And I understand that COVID's interrupted a lot of that stuff, but are those kind of outreach programs still going to come back? Or do you know, or I should say, is it a good idea to bring them back? Ben, are you familiar with that one? The series that they had?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. And I guess I'll let Erin answer first the "are they coming back" question, because she's best informed about the current plans, and then we'll ask about the "should" question.
Okay, thank you.
I would say I don't know of any immediate plans. You're right that COVID kind of upended a lot of the things that HEA used to do, different seminars and area meetings and things, and that I think everybody is pretty excited to like go back to having in-person things again. I don't think we have any immediate plans for those, and I don't know quite what that original thing was. We have a new member services person, so I'll need to look into whether that's on anyone's radar, because specifically it might not be, and I think we should put it on people's radar. I think those kind of things are great for informing and educating members and letting them ask questions.
Yeah, and just to give some context to what Tim was asking, I think you're right. It was in 2019. HEA had like a series of classes or workshops for members on at Kenai Peninsula College about things like heat pumps. I think solar panels. We talked about those. So, Summer, what are your thoughts?
Well, since I, previously taught space science, I am a strong advocate of education and any opportunity that presents itself. So I would fully support any sort of educational opportunity, whether it's in person or not. Sometimes Zooms are an efficient way of getting information out. That's been something that has, with COVID, while we haven't done in-person things, it is something that makes it possible. So someone in Seldovia could still participate in one of those sessions, or, someone who isn't able to get to the college, or isn't, not everybody is ready to re-enter the world, and that's okay too. So I think we could do a lot of different things, whether it's in person or in person with a Zoom component. And an educated cooperative is a better cooperative, I think, because people will understand what's going on and can help move everything forward. So yeah, I would be a strong advocate of that as well.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'll ask a question now that Kat asked in the chat about withdrawing forests and spruce bark beetle outbreaks. What about the cost of burying distribution lines versus having the traditional poles? And she cites the case of PG&E in California, Pacific Gas and Electric, where there were a number of wildfires caused by downed power lines there. So, what can HEA do to protect against that kind of failure? And is burying power lines a economical answer?
I'll go ahead and take that first. I think one option that would be worth pursuing, I know the planning department, I believe it's the planning department of the borough. They've got a spitfire of a young woman in that department now, and she's spearheading looking at ways that we can monetize the spruce bark beetle forests that are, dying before they become completely useless as far as forestry is concerned. And I think that working, possibly working in a way that some sort of partnership in that regard might be wise to just at least open a conversation, because removing that wood that's intensely flammable is the first step. And so that would be one avenue I would pursue or look at pursuing to help with that. I think getting rid of the tinder is going to help reduce the likelihood of having a 2019 fire season over again, which none of us want to go through, or worse, like what California experienced.
Yeah, and I'd say that, to the specific question of whether burying power lines makes sense sometimes, but it's more expensive. So it's definitely on HEA's radar. It's on all the utilities' radar. And so when power lines are being upgraded or replaced for whatever reason, it's certainly something that's looked at. But we have such a vast rural area that our power lines spread along that, that's never going to be a total answer. Like, we're not going to ever get all the power lines, down into the ground. Now, like Summer mentioned, can some of that tinder be cleared out? That's absolutely a possibility, and it does require partnerships, because HEA only really has the ability to clear trees within its particular right of way. And if a tree there are many, many trees that are outside the legal right of way that can still fall on the power lines. But that requires working with the landowners to get permission and/or, potentially share costs to get rid of any dead trees that aren't there. And I know that, like, for an individual homeowner, if you call HEA and say, hey, I've got this hazard tree that might fall on your power lines, but it's on my property, HEA will cut that down if you ask. As for the liability issue and the cost to the members, there have been at least 2 years in a row bills in the Alaska legislature to try to shield utilities from liability if a tree that hits the power lines wasn't in their right of way, wasn't something they could have cleared in the first place. So far, that hasn't gone through. I think it's the insurance companies mostly that object to that, and all the utilities in the state that are all co-ops, right? So the members, are on the hook if a tree that no one was legally allowed to cut down falls on a power line and starts the fire. So that might solve the money issue, but it won't solve the issue of dead trees falling down onto the power lines. And that, with working to clear them where it's possible, and sometimes to put them underground, and also to just have resilient systems. I mean, one of the nice things about our grid is that microgrids are like seen some places as these like sexy new things, but Alaska can already operate that way. When that in 2019, the Kenai Peninsula operated with our own little electrical grid for 6 months. And we need to make sure we keep that resilience and that ability to do that. And the battery is something that's going to help us do that more cheaply in the future if that does happen again, which we don't want, but it could.
All right. Thank you, Erin. Well, we've hit 6:30, so this is a last call for questions. And well, thank you all for coming. And Tim?
Nope, just gonna say thank you and good night. Bye.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you and good night.